is Penny Gamble Williams, and I love creating art. I love listening to music. I love just life.
Hello, and welcome to the Woke Wisdom Podcast with Alexandra Loves. That's me. And I'm here with my furry cosmic guardians, Cyrus and Bisu, joyfully coming to you from the moon garden where wisdom is nourished, awakening is embraced, and fun is encouraged. We took a little time off, and now we're back with our amazing guests. And I'm so honored because today we have our first grandmother episode. Yes, grandmother energy. But before we go there, I want to hear from you. Come to our IG, come to our Facebook, and let me know, what are your reflections about what you hear on this podcast? Are you enjoying the episodes? What's coming alive in you when you hear these guests share so deeply? I know that when I sit and, just in the recording itself, I listen to all these episodes a couple times. I sit in the actual recording and then I listen to as I'm editing, I'm listening to it again. And I learn something new every time, and I know I'm growing. So are you feeling that? Are we in this together? Let me know. Today, my guest is Penny Gamble Williams. Sitting with her felt like chatting with royalty, carrying powerful, ancient wisdom humbly and gently shared. And while I was editing this episode, I was just thinking, wow, I'm proud. I'm proud to know her, to be a woman with her, to be in this world, walking in this world with her. Penny Gamble Williams is an enrolled tribal member of the Chappaquiddick tribe of the Wampanoag Nation of Massachusetts, who honors her African blood. She is an activist involved with environmental and indigenous land rights. Penny is the spiritual leader and president of the tribe's nonprofit corporation. And from 1995 to 2002, Penny was the Sonsqua, or chief of her tribe. Penny Gamble Williams is a visual artist, art instructor, poet, writer, storyteller, and recording artist musician. Her radio show, The Talking Feather, aired on WOL 1450 AM in DC, XM Satellite Radio, Blog Talk Internet Radio from 2000 to 2013. In 2005, Penny and her husband, Thunder Williams, co-authored a concept paper on the historical connections and relationships of African and Native Americans. They presented it to the National Museum of the American Indian. A traveling exhibit called Indivisible African Native American Lives in the Americas was created. Penny and her husband represented the community on the curatorial team. All right, beloveds, let's take a deep breath and welcome Penny Gamble Williams.
And once I get going with my creativity, I'm all in the paint. I'm collecting shells. I'm placing sticks and all kinds of things on the canvas, to give it that organic look. And this makes me feel really, really happy.
Thanks for sharing. Creativity, isn't that the best thing to bring us love in our lives?
It really is.
Yeah. If you could be an animal or non-human, what would it be and why?
I would be a whale.
Oh, a whale.
A whale. Whales are amazing animals.
Mm-hmm.
And, originally they were land animals like 50,000 plus years ago.
I didn't know that.
So they had 4 legs. And, as changes happened, the oceans and the water and, how the earth was, they became sea animals.
Okay.
And they could dive to the depths of the ocean. And then they come up and then they refresh, they breathe, they commune, with the universe, and then they go back. They're just amazing, and fortunately, I got to see some whales in California. That just lifted me because I definitely feel connected to them.
Yeah.
And it's part of the Wampanoag story. So
Is it really?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Will you share that with us? Or do you feel comfortable to share that with us?
Okay. Well, there are lots of whale stories, but this
Oh, okay.
I'll just say this one. Um,
Mhm.
we have, I guess you can say, one of our creation stories about how the land came to be and how
Yeah.
Chappaquiddick and the islands in Massachusetts came to be.
Yeah.
And this wonderful person named Masha uh,
Mhm.
lived on the mainland, and he would take his pipe out and he would scoop up the tobacco and he would smoke his pipe and he would look out in the ocean and he wanted to fish. Well, he was a giant. So, in order
Yeah.
for him to fish, he had to catch whales.
What?
And, there would be lots of prayer and all kinds of things that would happen. And he would figure out ways where he could get to the whales.
Yeah.
So, he tapped his pipe and he got stones and he would walk out into the deeper part of the ocean and he would just scoop up a whale and he would be able to feed the people. But there would
Hmm.
be prayer because this whale sacrificed his life so that people could
Mhm.
eat. And eventually, um, that wonderful Mashop made the different islands. So he made the Elizabeth Islands, he made Chappaquiddick, Martha's Vineyard, and then Chappaquiddick, which means, or Cheepeaquiddick, which means cut off land,
Okay.
still connected by a sandbar uh,
Mhm.
to Martha's Vineyard Island. And then he made Nantucket and Muskegon and all of the other little islands along the coast of Massachusetts. So,
Wow.
but the whale is very much a part of who we are.
I didn't know that. This is in my limited um new knowledge here in this area. I hear a lot about the Lakota, and here it's the animal that you hear about a lot is the buffalo. And so it sounds like I very much am experiencing Lakota as buffalo people. And so I haven't heard anything about, I don't really know anything about, except for the very limited things they teach us in school, about any tribes of the Northeast. And so it sounds like what you're saying is these groups of people were whale people.
Yeah, yeah. We were whale people. We are whale people in many
Yeah.
respects, and have a lot of love and that connection to the whale because we're so close to the ocean. I mean, we're woodland and coastal people.
Yeah. That's so cool. Thank you. And also thank you for saying are. I heard myself say were. Are. That's important.
Yeah,
That's very important. I'll decolonize that in my head right now. Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
Is there something about yourself that you discovered in this past year that you could share with us?
Mm. Where do I begin on that?
So many things.
Oh yeah, no, so many things. I mean, things were moving along um, for a lot of years.
Mhm.
Activity, traveling, being with family, friends, participating in rallies. As an activist, just being involved,
Yeah.
having art shows, on and on and on and on, and then 2020 happened.
To
Uh,
all of us.
all of us. And it was really shocking to the spirit, to your soul.
Mhm.
And then there was so much going on. What is this COVID-19? The whole world is shutting down,
Mhm.
isolated. What the blank is going on? And, you're watching the news and all of that. So 2020 um, was quite an adjustment. I mean, for everybody, but to speak for
Right.
personally, the things that I was going through, and my husband going through,
Mhm.
as we tried to figure out, okay, what's the plan? You know, how do we get through this?
Yes.
And being family people, I mean, we have 5 children and lots of
Wow.
grandchildren,
Wow.
and great grandchildren. So, um,
Wow. You're a great grandma. What
yeah,
a blessing.
yeah, yeah. We have 4 and one more is coming.
Oh, congratulations. Bless your family.
So, I mean, personally, I went through anger. I went through
Hmm.
deep sadness, depression,
Yeah.
finding ways to uplift, and learning a lot about myself. Because when you have to kind of be still for a while, it's a lot of things that or instinctively or inside the things that you practice, the things that I practiced. All of a sudden it seemed like they went out the window and I had to, grab things from the air and redirect myself and say, ceremony, prayer, you
Yeah.
know, be still, breathe. These were some of the things that I found that I wasn't doing. And I know better.
Yeah.
So I became a little upset with myself that I allowed that to happen.
Hmm.
And I became kinder to myself and
Mm.
realized that this is life, you know, this is life. So it's been a lot of lessons, for the past 2 years. We're
Right.
going to the third year,
Yeah.
and there's so much to learn. We don't know it all, but I tell you, I do my research and I try to figure a lot of things out. So you won't get blindsided,
Yeah.
with stuff. But there was so much going on, information, questionable information. I mean,
Yes.
these are not normal times. And then you say, well, what is normal?
That is that question right there. I don't know anymore, Penny.
Yeah,
I don't know.
like carving out new ways of looking at life, and that's basically where I've been. Because every day is different, and we just have to be open. I always love to say, be open to the universe
Yeah.
because the answers are out there,
Yes.
and we just have to listen. We just have to really listen.
Yeah. I really appreciate these sentiments and this wisdom because one thing you just said just a couple minutes ago, you said, well, this is life. And I noticed myself too, and maybe in uh closer to 2021. And 2020 didn't get me so much because my life actually didn't change as much because I was kind of shut in for a while anyway. I was working on a lot of things personally and I was enjoying sort of being a little separate from people. But it was right around 2021 because I was kind of out of that phase, but I couldn't really go out and be in being socialized as I had in the past. And there was this part of me that felt like this, like wanted to be in denial about reality of life.
Yeah.
And was like, no, 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 no. All the things that are going to change and all the new challenges, those won't touch me, I hope. And those, they won't last. And I had no desire for things to go back to what we used to call normal, because even though a lot of that was comforting, I know it's time for major change. And I bless that. But there was a lot of parts of me, and still now I find I dig some of those up, that was like, this isn't real life. Just like very deep denial of what is going on. And I was surprised to find that within myself, because it's actually kind of out of character for me to be in denial about like, everything happening in this human life. So the way you said that, it actually gave me, and what you were explaining after actually gave me some relief. And I like the way you're talking about it, because it feels like this open door that just like all this bizarre stuff can happen, also all this opportunity, and we have access to all these answers if we remember to like sit still and be in the realness of the moment. So thank you so much for reminding me in this moment.
I during that time period, especially like 2020, just communicating with people was very different because there were
Mhm.
a lot of people had a lot of emotions, and we were all kind of emoting about different things.
Mhm.
The toughest thing was not being around family, grandchildren, children. So and not everybody lives in the area where we live. So we had to use Zoom and FaceTime, and that was so weird.
Yeah.
It was really different.
Yeah.
And
I attended a couple family gatherings on Zoom. That was so bizarre, like graduation ceremony and stuff. But I was like,
yeah,
wait, is this
I
real?
know, and I know, and then the unfortunate thing of a tribal member, she passed on, and the
Oh,
funeral was on
blessings,
Zoom.
blessings, blessings. Wow.
So just it was a total wake up call about a lot of things. And what was humming in my mind was we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
went over and over again
Hmm.
in my mind
Hmm.
because, it's like, okay, we're here. We came from other places before we came through the womb of our mothers, but this is what we have right now. So what are we going to do with all this? you know and you call on the spirit beings of the ancestors of the past, the relatives, and call out for help. I mean, give me a sign. And so that's basically how I move through the day. I ask for a
Mhm.
lot of times, and
Yeah.
um, need that comfort of knowing when you call in the ancestors, they do come, and you better have something for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Word blessings. Thank you for that reminder. That's, I mean, that's the way this is why I think it's so important for us to familiarize ourselves with the ways of human beings, which are indigenous ways.
Mhm.
Because if I've learned anything on my own spiritual journey, is that I'm not alone. There's like a whole congregation of spirits and ancestors with me, and I can access that more specifically in some ways, and less specifically in some ways, just meaning like I could go to divination, find out exactly which ancestors or exactly which spirits, or however I would do that in whichever culture I was interacting with. But also just simply interacting with water, ancestors, water, spirits of the water or the land, and that's accessible to everybody.
Yes.
And that's the way of human beings. And I'm really glad that you're bringing this up. Someone who's, your great grandmother, you're well practiced, and I love that you're saying, you're also acknowledging that you're human. You forget sometimes, and you forget yourself in some ways, and you come back to remembering this and spreading that wisdom. Does that sound accurate, what I just said?
Oh yeah. I
Okay.
mean, because look, it's a daily. I mean, you're going in your car or you grocery shopping or
Yeah.
whatever you're doing, and then that reality comes back of who you are.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get caught up on not even thinking about that because we have to go from point A to point B. We have to
Yeah.
take this, we have to take care of that. You got to pay your bills. You got to, you know,
Mhm.
and sometimes you forget to breathe. So it's all of these things that are going on as we're moving from, dawn to dusk.
Yeah.
And then there comes these moments where you have to say, okay, I gotta slow down. I gotta sit down. I gotta take a nap. I mean, really, it's all of those things, and then you come back refreshed, and you get it's like a balance.
Yeah.
It's a balance thing, because it gets back to this. in my mind. This is what comes up for me. And that's to understand not only our spirit, but this vessel that we have, which is our bodies, and how to understand um, like the outside interferences that seep in to, get us kind of off the path, off balance. And so it takes, I think, a moment to think about these things, to come to that realization, and then to put ego aside, because sometimes our egos get in the way with certain things, and we're really forgetting what our true purpose is here on this earth. I mean, because
yeah, it's not to sleep to work to sleep. It's not that, or to like go to our job to sleep to go to our job to sleep. Like that's not our purpose.
That's not what the purpose is.
Yeah.
There's a saying, I've seen it on Instagram, where you say, she understood the assignment.
Yes, I love that.
I love
that.
And I think about that. Am I understanding the assignment? So I mean, it's little things like that, that bring us back to balance.
I also want to point out here, listeners, great grandmother Penny Gamble Williams is up with the times and is drawing wisdom out of something very contemporary on Instagram. And it's so cool because it's like, it's such a profound, it's like such a simple little thing. I think it comes from a song or like a popular song or something like that. But it's actually this is what I'm noticing in this social media arena that we're in right now. There is a lot of garbage out there, right? But then there's these like little peaks of doors opening of wisdom that's actually quite profound. And sometimes we don't even notice it, but that one specifically, I understood the assignment. Yes.
There's another one, with all the things that are happening to people publicly, there's another one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether I can put it all together, but there's a woman's voice, and I guess it's a little skit, and people will play that on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
They'll listen to, auntie's or grandma's wisdom, and she comes out with, this is something I've been trying to tell y'all. People are going to try to belift you. They're going to satellite you. They're going to try to sabotage your name. They're going to destroy you. And you know what? That is really quite profound, because that's what's happening. Even though this wise grandmother, and some people will, in their little skit, will say, well, maybe she took a little drink, because what sabotage your name? What sabotage your name?
Yeah.
But regardless, it's the feel of what she is saying, because that is what's going on.
Yes.
Society right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is part of getting back to balance. This is part of getting back to understanding what our purpose is.
Yeah.
And all these outside interferences, saying things to hurt your feelings or whatever, are all, I don't know, they're just roadblocks in a sense, if you allow it to seep into your soul. And that's something that continues to play, within my life from past experiences.
Yeah.
You can't let those things interfere with whatever your goal is, whatever your focus is.
Absolutely.
Because it's your life, and they don't know.
Only really you know. You and your spirits. Like that's really what matters. And this is so important. I think when you're talking about like the sabotage and everything, and different forces or energies or even people against you, for a long time I used to think first of all, for a long time I didn't believe that was true. Like I just had this bubble in my mind. Of course nobody would work against me. Why would they work against me? Because I was so sheltered in that way. And it's not like my parents sheltered me purposely like that. It's just that's my heart didn't have everything was hard for me and not the best boundaries around such an open place. And so then I learned and started to acknowledge, accept like, oh yeah, sometimes people can work against you, consciously work against you. And then I would say more recently in the last like 10-ish years, I've been really acknowledging that in the systems around me, because people built those systems. And I started having more understanding of sort of behaviors and tactics of what we would call narcissists or psychopathic people with personality disorders. And those actually exist. Those behaviors exist in systems. And what I learned is like a system can tell you, we're helping you. This is good for you. We're doing our very best for the good of all the people. But what they're actually doing, the actions are very different. And I think that it's important to like acknowledge these things, like you're saying, and have awareness of these things, but also like you're saying, not dwell so much that we forget to remember our assignments and know that there are answers out there. Doing all of those things at once is gosh, it's almost like warrior work to be able to handle these two big forces going on that are conflicting.
I know. And I mean, it starts from childhood,
right?
All these different experiences and how these experiences are handled when people say things or you see things or you question things. I mean, it's just, it's just a series of trying to figure things out and then learning what comes into your space and what needs to not be anywhere near you.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of experience, a lot of time, and sometimes concentration, to make sure that, you're protected.
Yeah.
In many ways, because we're vulnerable in a lot of ways, because other people have other plans. I mean, just where we are now, I didn't say, hey, let's have a war in Ukraine. No.
That was not part of most of our plans, I would say.
Exactly. And so we find ourselves in that because it's palpable. You can feel that energy.
Yeah.
And you can feel the angst and the confusion and the sadness. And then we have to remember that it's like one air, one earth, one water. And we're all being affected by that. So how do we deal with that? That's the latest. And there's so many unknowns.
Yeah.
And it gets back to, okay, we're spiritual beings having this human experience.
Yeah.
How are we going to maneuver through this? Are we going to just lie down and say, oh, well, or are we going to say, no, we forge ahead with the things that are going to help not only ourselves, but help others?
Yeah. One of the challenges that I have, and like I'm in full agreement with you, but one of the challenges I have, and I know a lot of people listening have this challenge, is because of the overwhelm in our system, like the paying of the bills and the relationships we have and keeping our homes and, whatever they are, the list goes on, is how can we be of service when we're existing in overwhelm and the system continues to condition us into like, save yourself and save your family. That's about all as you can. As a lot of people are in survival mode without even realizing it consciously. How do we do that? How can we be of service and live under these values of one land, one water, and and helping others when we see all this chaos around us, and we're some of us are surviving, and some of us are kind of like at the hilt of what we can handle.
Exactly.
I don't know. It's different for everybody, but there's a way for everybody too, I think.
And that's the challenge, so to speak. What is the way? And like you said, there are many ways, and people are experiencing things at different levels.
Yeah.
The only thing that I can say is, if I'm speaking with somebody, I like to share. I like to share maybe some of my, I don't want to really call them methods, but different things that I have found that are helpful. Um, and sometimes it works. Sometimes people can't hear that because they're in the middle of all the things that you're saying. I mean, I'm in the middle. We're all in the middle of all the things that are going on.
Yeah.
And it gets back to becoming more aware of the surroundings, but not letting it like totally pull us down.
Okay.
And so how do you do that? You know, that is the thing. How do you do that? So I've seen within myself that, I mean, every day is different. It's not Groundhog Day, you know, where everything is the same. Even some days might seem like that, but it's all about energy. It's all about what we are allowing to come in, and I mean, that's just kind of a theme, basically, in how I how I process, what's coming in. What am I allowing? I mean, you can always turn the TV off.
That's right.
Radio off. And for me, it's not like I'm in denial of what's going on, but
Of course.
like I said in the beginning about art and creativity, we're all creative in many ways, and it's just a matter of understanding what that gift is. What did the creator gift us with? And everybody's different. So it's a matter of acknowledging the gift and giving thanks for the gift, whether it's being a good speaker, healer. I mean, there's a plethora of things that we hold within ourselves. So what are we bringing forth? And I guess for me, it's art, it's creativity, it's color, it's movement, it's music. It's so many pieces of that part of what was gifted to me that I absolutely must express every day in some kind of way. If I always have a drawing pad close by, or my iPad where I do a lot of digital work, or whatever it is, or how I arrange something on a table. It's being creative. It's seeing the beauty and something that maybe somebody might not even see it, but I think that's beautiful. It needs to be like that. So when I walk by, I see it and it makes me feel good. So that's all part of being creative. And this is the one thing, times when I've been able to work with young people, because that's what I've done for so long, either in the arts or whatever, or taking care of children in a care program. Always finding a way in to maybe help or to say something that might jog somebody's, either memory or gives them an idea, even from the little tot.
Yeah.
How they might want to arrange the blocks. It's things like that that you have to give, and you have to be willing to share.
Yeah.
And that's a gift that we all have. We just have to bring it forward.
Yes. I love that. Yeah, that's everything you're talking about here is in some way accessible. I think I want to say in whatever situation you're in. And also what I'm hearing is, and you definitely use the word remember, but remembering who we are as creative beings. That, I mean, that is, there's this theme of remembering who we are, and if we can tap into that, no matter what the pressure is, then there will be something to share. You might not know what it is, but there will be something you can share with people that'll inspire people in some way or another.
Because you never know. And that was something that my mother always used to say. We'd have a discussion, and you're expressing something, and she would say, in her deep New England accent.
Yeah, I love your accent, by the way. My mother used to say.
Yeah, my mother. And today's her birthday.
So happy birthday, dear mother.
Oh yeah, this was so significant when you said, "Are you available on the 3rd?" My mother's birthday.
Wow.
So I'm honoring her today, and I'm so grateful to be able to speak her name on your program. Her name is Adele Clara Smith Gamble, and she was
Adele Clara Smith Gamble.
Yeah. Also, she was also known as Quiet Fire, but she never used that name. But because of her personality and how she moved through life, she was quite a force. She worked with young people. She was an artist, a community activist, and did a lot of things in the Providence, Rhode Island community, and was quite a mother. I'm the only child, but
I mean, so how you live, because I see, like, I mean, it doesn't take much to look you up and see so much of what you're involved in. You don't have to look deep. It's out there. Like, so that's something that you grew up with. This is not only in your blood, but also practically part of how you were raised.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. I mean, my parents were really something. They lived through a lot of different things, coming from that time period. My dad was from Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, and grew up there and spent a lot of time in the country with his grandparents in a little town called New Bern, which my husband and I traveled to. And we were in and out of it before we realized, where is New Bern? We went down this road, and then we were in another town.
Okay.
Yeah, it was that. It's that small.
Yeah, half a horse town.
Yeah, there you go. But that's where he spent a lot of his time growing up, in the summer. And so he shared a lot of those experiences. And then he was a musician. He was in the armed service, in the Navy, and this whole thing about segregation and all of that stuff. So he was an activist in his own right by sharing those stories and always reminding me to pay attention. His whole thing was, you have to know what's going on. You have to read the paper. He read books, the newspaper. I mean, he stayed up with the times, but he also would instill. He was another one who instilled, use your gifts, and so what's my gift? When you're little, when you're young, I mean, what's a gift? Is he talking about something that Grammy just gave me? That was a nice gift.
Yeah.
My pencil sharpener, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, until you get older and you realize what these gifts are that you possess inside that, was given.
Wow.
And so my mother, my father, my grandmother, the whole community, Providence is small. And I grew up in the city on the east side, and there was so many of us who were alike in terms of being either Narragansett, Wampanoag, and African American, and even European. So and Cape Verdean, Portuguese. So that was the community. And
wow.
it was a very tight community because everybody knew everybody. And when I tell you that, when I moved away and I would come back and, bring my kids, one time I just had my two youngest, we went to visit, and we stopped off at the grocery store, as my mother said, the market, because that's what everybody called it.
The market. I love it.
Off at the market, and we're going down the aisles, and somebody says, "Oh, Penny, is that you?"
Oh, wow.
Be in town. I thought you were going to be in later, but oh wow, what time is it now? So you're here early.
Wow, everybody knows. They know your flight number. They know what car you're going to drive in.
How's your husband? I heard he's working at such and such now. These people know everything, and my kids are fascinated by it, especially my two youngest. They said, "You can't go anywhere where you don't know somebody."
I miss that. I love that. I grew up in a small town, and I just, there's something comforting about that. And honestly, I think it's the way we're supposed to live.
Right about that. That's how I feel, but you adapt and you try to take little things from that and make it a part of, your life wherever you are, so you can be the conduit to make that happen.
Yeah, that's truth. That's true. I'm realizing that right now is just thinking about how I barely know my neighbors. Yeah. I live in an apartment building in the city, and there's this lady next door, and every once in a while, I'm a little scatterbrained, and every once in a while I leave my keys in my front door. And though this building has security, sometimes people will just walk through and they'll look for open doors and things will get stolen. And so leaving my keys in the door is not a good idea, especially in the middle of the city. And my next door neighbor she's so caring, and I don't even know her name. And she's like, she'll knock on my door and be like, "The keys are in the door." She's like, "Look, you're by yourself. You don't live with anybody. So from now on, if I see your keys, I'm just going to open your door and throw them in and then close your door for you. Okay. Just know that that's going to happen." And I was like, "Okay, thanks." And it's happened a few times. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's when I hear that door open and keys like fly into my house, like the door closed, I'm like, oh wow, like I'm taken care of by this person who lives next to me. I don't even know her name.
I know.
And I'm like, I live next to a whole floor of people that have things going on that, like, literally their energies right next to me. Their ancestors and their spirits probably have had conversations with my ancestors and my spirits. Like, we're living on the same land, and and here I am longing for more community. I'm like, there's so much opportunity right outside my door.
It's funny how that is, because when we moved into this neighborhood, everybody knew everybody. And our kids played with other kids, and then new people moved in, and our house was like the hub, and I used to do arts and crafts in the backyard, and it turned out to be like a little day camp.
I want to live next to you. I'm moving.
But that was then, and this is now. Play music, be in the garden, and planting things, and having kids come and help, and had sons that were into music, and they were banging on paint cans and having their friends come over and play guitars and all kinds of stuff. So there was a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
Within several blocks of kids coming here, and now things are so different. People come and go, you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And people don't speak. You wave and
I have trouble because I take care of other people's kids in a neighborhood where there's a lot of people who know each other, and there's potential for playing on the street and everything all the time. But and I've thought to myself, if I had kids, I try to, because I'm taking care of other people's kids, it's different, they're not my flesh and blood, and I get paid to take care of them. But I try to apply to, like, if they were my kids, what would I do? Because I want to give them the best that I know within me. And there have been times when I'm like, gosh, if these were my own kids, I would have a lot of qualms in the era that we're in, because it's like, I want them to be able to play outside and be able to just hang out on the block and do whatever and go in and out of people's houses. But I'm also so aware right now that in this time of what I've been calling a great revelation and all this pressure and the shifting of what's going on spiritually, psychologically, how we're identifying ourselves and others, I also know that there's a lot of shadow coming up, a lot of the stuff that we don't necessarily want to see. And I'm lucky to be within myself and communities, people who go to therapy, who do their shadow work, if we want to call it that, who do workings with their spirits, ancestors, angels, or whatever, and are consciously on a healing and evolution path. But that's not everybody. I feel like that's a smaller percentage in this world than I would like it to be. And so while I'm like, I would want, if they were my kids, to be able to play and do all that and be in and out everybody's house and feel free to go sleep over at somebody's house or whatever, I'm also highly aware that there's a lot of people walking around that, though they might be responsible to know to tell your kid to get out of the street or like feed your kid when they're hungry, I find myself really deeply not trusting that they're in a place of responsibility with their own shadow stuff or their own traumas or their whatever's maybe circling around them that might be parasitic. I'm feeling untrusting of the general population around me and the acquaintances around me, that they would be okay to be around my children if I had them, or children in my care.
Exactly. That's somewhat of a reality that we're all experiencing and seeing, hearing about right now. It's the sign of the times, and I look at it this way: because of the destruction that has happened, poisoning of the water, Mother Earth, the air, it's affecting people in many ways. The GMO food, the lack of food, and a lot of communities where they don't have, food.
Yeah.
Food sovereignty things going on. And so they're not getting the nutrition that's needed. I mean, it's all connected.
Yes.
It's all connected. And even though there's so much information about growing your own food and growing micro greens in your house and all kinds of wonderful things like that, but everybody doesn't understand that, or they don't see themselves doing that because they're not sure how they can, and so people end up with all kinds of maladies and ways of thinking, and sometimes it's generational. So
yes,
it's like a confluence of things that are happening right now, and we're seeing sometimes the worst in human behavior. And even though there are some really wonderful things that are going on with people who are trying to do something about the things that are happening all around the country and around the world. So it's a bit complicated in many ways. But I think once we step back and we see what's going on and understand that regardless of what's going on, we still have to live our lives in a way that's good for this earth that we live on, and for the people who come into our lives, that we come in contact with.
Yeah. One water, one community, one earth.
Yeah, that's exactly this is what we have. This is exactly what we have.
Hey, Aunt Penny, we were talking a little earlier about like your parents, and you started talking a little bit about Chappaquiddick and Wampanoag. And I'm just wondering about something that blew me away. that I had just learned in about 2020. And that was back when you and I met, and Dima Mahmood and I were doing Africa Week 2020, which, listeners, if you want to check it out, all those videos are on Facebook. And during this, we had this panel, and I don't remember, because you sat in on a lot of panels and did a lot of stuff with us. Thank you for doing that, by the way. It's such a weird time, 2020. 2020 is so strange. But I had just started learning through you and some people who were in the Caribbean about Afro-Native heritage. Mm-hmm. And my mind blew up because it's just something that I just never considered. Yeah. Like in my head, the conditioning is that there's people who are native to these lands and there's different tribes and stuff. And then there are enslaved peoples that were brought from West Africa, and that's their story. And so obviously in the last 15 years, I've been digging into figuring out more about what that's about. And instead of thinking of people who are African-American, just enslaved peoples. But for some reason, in all the researching and interactions that experiences that I was learning about, there was nothing about Native Afro culture. I was also surprised to learn that there were people that had dark Black skin that were living also on this side of the world, on this continent, that never touched enslavement. And I was like, oh my God, I'm 30. At that time, I think I was 37. And I was like, how have I never heard these stories? And I'm like, wow. Okay. So I uncovered some history, and I'm like, I never heard this story. I never heard the real story of Rosa Parks. I never heard the real story about, I never even thought to think outside of enslavement and think these people aren't slaves. They're just people who were enslaved. And I'm like, oh my God. And then to hear this,
I know.
I'm like, how? I know why, but how? So could you, I know I'm not the only one, and I bet most of our listeners are like, please tell me more about this, right? So could you share just a little bit about your heritage journey, and also what are we talking about when we're talking about Afro-Native and your experience with that?
Okay.
It's a big question, I know.
No, this is what I know, because this is what I experienced, and then later on, gained more information. Growing up in my community, as I told you earlier, in Providence, it was a very interesting community, and there were the Narragansett people of Southern Rhode Island. They have a reservation, and many people would come to the city to work. Mm-hmm. And then you had Wampanoags from, Massachusetts, who also moved to Rhode Island and lived in this, this community, the east side of Providence. Mm-hmm. And so you get used to that, in your community. And then when you venture out,
the mixing, get used to just people mixing like that, and having Native culture mix in with the urban life.
Exactly. Okay. And, or in many different ways, because like I said, they're Cape Verdeans.
Okay. Yeah.
And Portuguese, and, so many different cultures. Mm-hmm. In a small radius. So that was one part of it, of knowing, this Italian community, the Irish community, the Jewish community, the Cape Verdean, the Portuguese, and we're all kind of somewhat together,
yes,
interacting in many different ways. And then you have Native people, like I said, who came from different communities in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So you're used to that. But then when you venture out to go to school, and you talk about being, Wampanoag, and they look at you, looking at your hair, looking at your skin color, and all kinds of things. And then they put that doubt in your mind, because you're kind of in your community, but then when you venture out and you talk about that, a lot of people don't understand that. And they didn't understand that because in New England, they said all the New England Indians were dead. Mm-hmm. So you have that to contend with. And there's a story I like to tell. Fifth grade, uh, went back to school, had a great summer. I went to the Cape to visit relatives. I'm on Martha's Vineyard for a month. In New Bedford, visiting other relatives. Then we go down to August meeting, down to Narragansett, to celebrate down there. It's not really a powwow, but it kind of is. It's just it's a very special gathering that's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Wow.
My father used to go there, so that was a big deal. So you go back to school. The teacher says, "Write about what you did this summer, boys and girls." And I was a very shy child. I like to listen. I didn't like to be the one. I asked questions, but I was more of a listener. I was excited to hear. When somebody asked me for my opinion, eh, you know, I know. But that particular day, I wrote what I did. I stood up and I read it. And when I sat down, the teacher came over and firmly put her hand on my shoulder, squeezed it, and said, "It's not nice to tell stories like that. All the New England Indians are dead." Said it. I slumped down in my chair. All the other students, were giggling and looking at me, like I had lied. So I went home, told my mother. I told you my mother was quiet fire, right?
Yes, and she was quiet about being quiet fire.
And she said, "Never let anybody tell you who you are.
Bless her.
Or your history." And with admonishment, she just would not. She wouldn't hear of it. So the next day, she accompanied me to school. Had a little talk with the principal and eventually the teacher.
Yes, quiet fire. Bless you.
So that really helps me. That fifth grade experience, in that time period in my life, made me promise myself that I would never, ever let anybody say that. And no matter what it took, I was going to let people know that we exist.
Yeah.
Because that's what my mother told them, that you're looking at a Wampanoag and we exist.
Yes.
So that was my entry into speaking up or talking a little bit more than I had in the past, and really standing firm and that being of who I am, along with my father talking about what he experienced, segregation, because it was segregation in Rhode Island too. We all knew that, but we were kind of comfortable in our community, that little radius of Afro natives, Cape Verdeans, etc. But so the way that a lot of people from the time of enslavement, wait a minute, I'm going to put a pause on that. Before Columbus, let's be real. West Africans came to this continent down in the Yucatan and other places, and traded and intermarried, had connections with people in that area, the Mayans, etc., would go back to Africa as people traveled back and forth. And it's in the logs of Columbus, who realized that this was happening. They were here way before he was, and some of the other explorers.
Penny, Penny, before you go on, do you mind sharing with us sources, it could be now or later, where if people want to find out more about the African presence in these lands in South America and what we call America and South America, could you share that with us for people who are wanting to know more about that, like where to find info?
There's a book by Ivan Van Sertima, and his book is They Came Before Columbus. And then there is another book, and I wish I had that in front of me right now, but I don't, by a native educator who his name is Jack D. Forbes, and he wrote several books, and he gave you know praises to Ivan Van Sertima for writing that book, and then he later on continued doing research, and he challenged other people who read his book to continue to do the research to find out more about this Afro-Native connection. So that's a foundation, and that's something that really was kept out of the history books.
Yes.
And then, of course, the experience in New England, up and down the coast, the East Coast, where they said there are no Indians. They said that about Maryland. Oh, there are no Indians in Maryland. There are no Indians in New Jersey. There's definitely no Indians in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
So forth and so on. And then, Virginia, the Carolinas, but we knew better.
Yeah.
We knew better. But a lot of the intermarriage came from the enslavement period. So there's something that someone coined the phrase stolen people on stolen land.
Mm-hmm.
And so people were enslaved together in the Carolinas, picking cotton, the indigo fields, all the different things that were done in the Carolinas and Georgia, etc., where enslaved people were together with enslaved Native people from the different tribal nations down there. So you had that. And then, of course, you're penalized for that, because now you're faced with what the slave owners, and some of them allowed that to happen, wanted that to happen. They used to say, if you mated a Native woman with an African man, you'd have a stronger stock.
Oh, man.
So it was very inhumane in a lot of ways, but there were actual relationships that happened, that formed and were forged during those times.
Wow.
So now you have people who are mixed, they're African and Native, and they are still within that community, but yet they're being told that you don't exist because now you have that one drop rule. One drop of black blood, you are no longer Native.
And then you can be filed into chattel slavery.
Well, all of that, but you can be reclassified, and that's what happened in Virginia.
Wow, what a mess!
What a mess! And it happened in New England. So a lot of Narragansett people were, declassified, and even though they're on the same land that they've been there for time immemorial, and now they're just reclassified as colored or Negro. Yeah, they do ceremonies. Yes, there were people intermarried, but they never lost the culture.
So just for clarity, what I'm hearing you say is that when we're talking about Afro-Native culture, we're talking about, I think you said how people came together from African heritage and various Native heritages that came together by choice. And this is happening pre-Columbus days for hundreds of years that we might not even know how far back that goes. And also the intermarrying that was forged by, basically supremacy and capitalism practices to create, what they thought would be the strongest, quote unquote, stock, as they say, right? So, and some of this is documented and some of it isn't. And so some of what we know is passed down through, we can read it, we can find it. And then there's some where there's groups of people who just know, and it comes through oral history. Wow.
It's all of those things. And not everybody intermarried. It's a lot of different variations of a theme, so to speak. So you have these communities. Um, I'll just go back to where I'm from,
Mhm.
where you have, this thing, full blood, that a lot of people like to throw around.
Yes.
You have people whose families did not intermarry with people, and so you have a certain line, and then somebody would marry a non-native person or a person who was mixed native and African and European
Yeah.
get together. So you have these variations of people who are living in that community, that has always existed, where they know who they are,
Mhm.
regardless of what they look like,
Mhm.
and they continue their cultural practices. And now this has been going on for so long.
Yes.
Yet the colonial Western construct of so-called historians, um, and intellects who want to write history consciously leave those things out because it has a lot to do with land.
Yes.
It has a lot to do with the history that's been created in terms of how America came to be.
Mhm.
With our forefathers, our great leaders, our, you know, et cetera, and so forth, and all the wonderful things, our values, and I could go on and on and on. Where are we now? They want to not talk about slavery anymore. They don't want to talk about that existing. They don't want to
Mhm.
talk about so many things that are wrong with this country.
Yeah.
I just want to sweep it under the rug because it's brought out the guilt, it's brought out the truth, and as that
And it
movie.
will screw with their money. I mean,
Totally. Oh, this is
let's be real about that too. It'll screw with a lot of people's money.
imagine when Barack Obama became president, and I remember something that Michelle Obama talked about, being in the house that was built by Africans,
Yeah.
by enslaved people who built the Capitol and the White House and all these other buildings.
Mhm.
And I mean, a lot of people weren't ready for that. They were absolutely not ready for that. And so I guess maybe a couple of people said, let's make note of that. Let's put that under the rug. We can't talk about that. When they're gone, we're not going to talk about that anymore. But I mean, it's just a whole bunch of things like that. So we are at a moment of truth about everything that's going on right now. And a lot of truths are being revealed
Mhm.
about everything, about wars, about COVID, about you name it. It's coming to the surface, and there's a bunch of people that are trying to, oh no,
Yeah.
we can't let that out. No. And so there's the confusion. So it's about cutting through all of that and looking at it for what it really is. And if we really open our minds, we see what it is. And now we have to figure out, how are we going to heal from that? How are we
Yeah.
going to move through life without getting more scars from all of that? Because we all have scars from it.
Of
It's about
course.
healing right now. It's really about healing.
Yeah, and I truly believe that no matter where you're from or what color, however little or much melanin you have in your skin, that the wound that we all suffer is actually the same, like the seed of that wound. And I truly believe that's being um, conditioned to think that we're disconnected from the land, ancestors, and spirit. We've been just, all of us have been dehumanized at some point, and then we exist under these structures that continue to put us in these boxes and give us these labels and continue to get us attached to ways of being and ideas that just cause us to fight each other and get distracted from who we really are, and also what is actually working against us, and taking focus off knowing the truth about about, the system that we're in and what is really inside us. And it's like, as I'm saying it, it sounds conceptually really simple, but like we said before, we have a life around us, and we have the kids and the food and the bills and going through the day. So yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I'm interested to see what people think about this book too. They came before us, because I have posted about this book, because I asked, like, has anybody read this book? And this is like maybe a year ago. I haven't read it yet, but I posted because somebody gave it to me on a reading list once. And it was interesting to see the reactions. There were some people who were like, this is a great book, I highly recommend it. And then there were some people, and I don't know where they were coming from. I don't know if they're coming from institutions or not, but they were like, no, this is all disproven. None of this is real. It's all of it's bogus. And I'm like, like, and I remember the people who were saying that. I respect like what they're doing in this world and their work. And I wonder, like, how much of how we interact, I feel like there's this consistent rejection and denial of anything that reveals a truth about terrible things that have happened to indigenous people of this land and enslaved people. Anything that sort of, and I am not saying that those people who didn't like this book were brainwashed into that at all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, it's suspect to me that I see that pattern, that anyone talking even a little bit about how this what they call alternative history, which may actually be the real history, right? It's interesting how aggressive and how loud people get about, no, that can't be real. It's not real. And here's the intellectual reasons. And here are the practical reasons and the logical reasons. And I'm like, yeah, but the reality that we're in and what we believe and what we teach each other isn't logical either, or practical, or, how we're living isn't logical or practical. It actually doesn't work. And I know that to heal something, acknowledging a wound or a block and finding the truth behind the truth is necessary for healing a lot of the time. So why not find out about this stuff? I mean, that sounds logical and practical to me.
Do is open his book and Jack Forbes' book and look at the bibliography, look at all the research, where they went to get this information. Traveling to European institutions, libraries, talking to scholars who know this history.
Yes.
And who've not denied it, Europeans who've written about, the but the reality of they came before Columbus.
Right.
It's documented.
Yes.
Documented. And Ivan Van Sertima, bless his heart, he's in the spirit world, did this.
Yeah. And
he was vilified because in the institutions, if you get this history out, it changes the whole
everything.
This country and about a lot of other things that happened in this world. To look at Africa as the seat of where people came from and the seat of knowledge. I mean, look at how they've suppressed that. Nobody thinks about all the Greeks that went to Africa to
learn.
Started back, and they were kind of enslaved by the Romans. But they fought the Romans, and I mean, it's
mind blowing.
It is, and so I just give thanks for Ivan Van Sertima and Jack Forbes, and so many other people. I mean, there's some Tony Browder, who goes back and forth to Egypt, to Kemet, to explore that history. He's been doing it for maybe 35 years.
Wow.
Bringing back amazing information. There are so many other people. A brother, oh my gosh, I need to bring his name forward because he also needs to be heard. But there's another brother who did so much his exploring museums and talking to people and going traveling to Africa and just about every place in the world,
Mhm.
bringing forth African history and knowledge.
If you can't remember his name, then we'll definitely post. I'll post all these books and everything, and we'll post his name as well in the Instagram and
Almost coming,
Facebook
it's
page.
almost there. Blurt it out before we.
Okay. Um, I have a question about a position that you held. You were chief
Yeah.
Sonksqua. I think I'm saying that right. From 1995 to 2002. And I wanted to ask about this experience for you, especially now that we understand, some of the challenges that are around just having an identity like Afro Native. And also, I think a lot of us are aware of the challenges of Native people and their sovereignty here in the United States, as well as sort of the conditions that African Americans live in. There's a lot of, and you're a woman, and there's a lot of convergence here. A lot of what we call now intersectionality that you represent. And so could you tell us a little, first give us a little context, because a lot of us have no idea. When somebody says chief, we have a very superficial idea of what that is. So could you just tell us a little bit about what that means and tell us some of the roses and thorns of being chief for 7 years? That's a considerable amount of time.
Okay. I have to start at a certain point.
Sure.
All the way back to my birth, but a lot of that has something to do with it. It was kind of how I was raised, the knowledge that my mother passed down to me, and so many other elders living in the city and knowing that that my mother's people came from Chappaquiddick Island. How do we bridge that? And it was a time when the land had been stolen from us, tricked. Our people were tricked out of losing the land, thinking that we would come back. I mean, the island was very small. We occupied the whole island before the English came, and then when they started coming, the first thing they did was they made an agreement with our sachem, Pakipanuso, and they wanted to just send their animals over there to graze.
Hmm.
So we didn't have those animals. We didn't have, swine. We didn't have cows,
Mhm.
things like that. But some agreement happened, and our grand sachem thought that it was just going to be a couple animals that would, occupy a little pasture. But they brought a whole slew of animals, and it just, caused a lot of trouble. So from that point on, we had issues about land. Some of our people actually went to England to speak to the crown. We sent letters, etc.
Wow.
Right. And then we couldn't live like that. And then now the English were coming, and they were converting people and so forth. So you kind of get
to religion, right? Converting people to religion. Okay.
To their religion, and some of our people loved storytelling, and of course, they talked about the allegories, they talked about the Psalms, and we had people who had once been enslaved, learned English, came back, and so those are the people that the missionaries would deal with, because now they could interpret, they could speak in Wampanoag and tell the story and kind of entice people.
Yeah.
And so now you had those who were being converted are being told you can no longer listen to what your sachem is saying. He's the devil. He's evil. Medicine people, they don't know what they're doing. They're going to poison you. They're going to, your brother doesn't want to join us. Don't talk to him anymore. I'm simplifying it, but there were actually rules. And then there were Christian towns that were being created where only Christian natives could live. And if your
Mhm.
sister or cousin or mother didn't agree with that, you no longer had um, relations with your
Sounds
family.
like a cult.
Sure does. So, with all that went on, and now we come up to a different time period. Now, my family, most of them had to leave to make a living.
Uh-huh.
So, what's happening to the land? We thought that we could come back and go back to the land actually that was allotted to us. I mean, because they made Chappaquiddick into a reservation.
Mhm.
And so we had a certain area that was called the land of the whites and the lands of the so-called Indians because there had been intermarriages of
Mhm.
Africans. And you know, it's interesting in New England and Connecticut where the Pequot would bring in runaways and you know, formerly enslaved people or some who had just gotten off the boat, the slave ships.
Mhm.
Because these ports, you know, I guess the captain or whomever couldn't keep track of everybody.
Yes.
Sometimes there would be someone who wasn't totally chained and would slip away.
Wow. Good for them. Bless.
Yeah, and so that happened in many different areas where the Pequot in Connecticut and the Narragansett would take in runaways, and so did the Wampanoags.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, and there's a Wampanoag family, an Aquina family. They live on the main island of Martha's Vineyard, Nope. Their family actually helped a runaway. They harbored him, and they wouldn't let those who were looking for him. They hid him. They said we don't know anything. They were able to get his chains off, and they still have those chains in their family.
What?
So there are stories like that. So with all of these things that happened, and we don't have our land, we have titles, but we don't own it all. So a family was allotted land, but one family member didn't have the money, and they allowed a white person to have that portion of the land, and it went on like that.
Oh my
So in
God.
the 50s and 60s, families like mine would get letters from attorneys. And then there would be these things posted in the Vineyard Gazette about land that was going up for auction.
Are you saying 1950 and 1960?
Yeah,
Okay, I just want to make that real clear
50s,
about when this was.
these letters were going out to Chappaquiddick Wampanoag families.
I have to say, this is really important for us to acknowledge that this was not that long ago in history.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So within the families of Chappaquiddick Wampanoags who lived within the neighborhood, we were all together, even though we weren't on Chappaquiddick, but we were in Providence. Some were living in North Providence, some people were living in East Providence, but we all knew each other. We went to the same churches, we partied together, we had socials together,
Mhm.
and everybody talked and everybody went to everybody's house. So
Yeah.
the Chappaquiddick continued in Rhode Island. And then we had relatives in New Bedford and on the Cape. So, you know, there was this stream of this unbroken chain, so to speak, of being together. And so my mother and some of the other Chappaquiddick Wampanoag people would get together and, you know, talk about these letters. Did you get a letter? Well, I got a letter last week. And so the things that I would hear, you know, growing up, and they would ponder, what can we do about this? Nobody had the money to hire attorneys to deal with this. So one by one, land would be sold or auctioned off, and you'd get $1,000 if you were lucky.
Oh my God.
And sometimes $200. So
Oh my God.
for a while,
Jesus Christ.
My activism was very much nurtured there. And then I moved to DC in 72 during the time of the Trail of Broken Treaties, where Native people took over the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So that was a big story. And I was seeing all that and hearing it. I didn't get involved at that particular time. I didn't get involved until 1978, the longest walk, where Native people walked and converged. They walked from California, Alcatraz to California, and converged here in Washington, D.C. to bring a message to, I think at the time it was Carter. I'm not sure who was in office at that time, but 20 points. Here are the things that Native people need. We have to have this. And it was about better schools, better housing, health, Indian Child Welfare Act. I mean, a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah. I got involved with that. I walked from where I lived to DC with my backpack to be a part of it, and met some friends there. And I volunteered to be, in the office and work at the Longest Walk office. And my whole world opened up in terms of what was going on in other Native communities. And then I looked back to mine and I realized, I said, we got to do something about this.
Yeah.
I bugged my mother all the time. And, she and all the other family members, distant relatives, because we're all related in many ways, of Chappaquiddick people, didn't know what to do. And so now I'm meeting tribal leaders from the Lakota Nation, from the Dene Nation, from California, Cherokee, you name it. They're all coming to the Longest Walk office. And I'm there as a volunteer, taking calls and opening mail. It was a time of Leonard Peltier being, arrested. It's a lot going on. And I'm like a sponge. And I'm seeing, how deep all of this is. So now I'm trying to figure out what is it that I can do for my people.
Yeah.
It took a while. I met the indigenous people of Maryland, the Piscataway Indian Nation, and got very involved with them. They kind of took me in because I could make posters and flyers.
The artist.
I was invited to go to one of their meetings, and my friend who invited me introduced me because they had a tribal meeting, and she said, "Oh, and she's an artist." So the Piscataway Indian Nation said, "Good, I'm going to put you to work. Can you do a flyer?" I said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
I was in, and I learned so much.
Use those gifts.
Yeah, there you go. So I learned so much from that chief Billy Red Wing Tyak and so many of the people, and his community embraced a lot of people from Central and South America, from other nations. So it was a hub. Anybody who came to DC that had to testify up on Capitol Hill about all these things always met at Tyak territory.
Yeah.
And I was there. I met Russell Means and all of the AIM leaders. I joined the American Indian Movement. I became a member of Women of All Red Nations, and I immersed myself in the politics and all the things that were going on in Indian country. And that's when I got this opportunity to meet other people and kind of had this vision of bringing the Chappaquiddick people back to the land. And so that's how I became the chief. We had an election after our initial meeting on Chappaquiddick. We had a ceremony.
Wow.
At a gathering, potluck. And we only thought maybe 10 or 15 people would come. 50 people came.
Wow.
And it was an amazing ceremony. Because you just never know where you're going to end up. And many times I would be introduced to somebody who'd be that gem that I wasn't even looking for, but it would just, they'd say, you should talk to so and so.
Yeah.
Because that was my intentions were, how do I make something happen? Because that's what I was always hearing from my mother. We don't know what to do. We don't have the
Mhm.
money to hire an attorney. How would we ever get back to the island?
Mhm.
Um, so the ancestors tapped me on the shoulder and would place me in a library, and I would find a book. I would
Wow.
find exactly what I needed, or find a document, and it kept going on, and then finally, after talking to the elders, especially this, I don't want to tear up, but it's really amazing how the creator places you in different situations, and that's exactly what happened. Because
Wow.
this one elder, he said, Penny, if that's what you think we need to do it. We have to bring our people together, and so it kept going on like that.
God.
And so we met. We decided to have meetings all the time, and we decided to have an election. We decided to um, incorporate, in case we ever made any money, people could donate,
Yeah.
uh, and look at our spiritual selves, talk about our stories, what
Mm.
our grandparents shared, and great grandparents, and of course a lot of the people, the elders there. I mean, they used to live. They would be there all the time, not on Chappaquiddick, because that was almost a place where you really couldn't go. It had a lot of wealthy
Yeah.
people, and only, I think there was only one or two families, native families, that lived on that island.
Wow.
But to go there, because you take a ferry to Martha's Vineyard, and then you have to take another ferry to get to Chappaquiddick. And so as a child, we would go, but we'd never get out.
Mhm.
We just drive down Chappaquiddick Road and then make a wide turn and just slowly drive back, and maybe look out at the beach.
Yeah.
And people would point out, yeah, that's where your grandfather used to live, right there in that house with Aunt Sarah. And then that's where that was a family compound over there. Then
Oh
we
my gosh.
ride back to Martha's Vineyard and get some clams, and
It's like a ghost town of occupied by rich people.
yeah, or people who not everybody there was wealthy, but
Yeah.
descendants of some of the missionaries. You know what I mean? It was
Oh, right.
kind of that.
I mean, it sounds like, hearing your story in this setting, it sounds like you becoming Song Squaw was this beautiful, spirit blessed convergence of you using your gifts, of you being a receptor
Yeah,
of all of these experiences of the Native and Indigenous leadership and activists from all over this land.
yeah,
Because it sounds like a lot of what you did, what was like, you were just absorbing this wisdom. And I love this story about you, being making the flyers and stuff too, because I've been definitely parts of movements, communities, and events where, like, you're the person doing something, like doing some work where you're like, making something with your hands or whatever, and all you have to do, besides the art you're making or whatever, is meditatively listen to the conversations that are going on around you. Yeah.
I wasn't the outside person. I wasn't the one.
Yeah.
I was the worker. I would go to the
Yeah.
meetings. I would be the one who would maybe take notes or listen, or call somebody up. So I did a lot of background work because I was
Yes.
comfortable doing that,
Mhm.
than anything else, and then supporting everything that was going to make a change and make things better. environmentally, because that was a big piece of what was going on. So I was very involved with environmental issues, indigenous issues, people issues, African issues. So it all kind of came together because
Wow.
that's that was the only way that I could live and do things.
God.
And
Thank
yeah,
you for walking this path. I mean, it's like, and it also reminds me of like, don't ever take for granted that person in the corner who's answering the calls, or, everybody that is there for whatever the cause is or helping towards a goal. Everybody has value. And, I'm so grateful that you're sharing this. It's really a beautiful convergence of all of these amazing things about you. And,
yeah.
go ahead.
Beauty of it, as you know, my husband always supported all of these things, and sometimes he was involved in many ways, helping, and our kids were involved,
Hmm.
ceremonies, and I made sure that they understood that part of their culture, because they're also West Indian culture, and so
Yeah.
all of all of those connections, they're Carib blood on the West Indian side, and just kind of, I mean, they went to a lot of rallies, let's put it that way.
The regulars.
There's a picture of our youngest daughter holding a flag, and just the expression on her face is like, why did I say I would come to this rally? But you know what, she remembers parts of why she was there, even though she didn't want to be there on that day,
Mhm.
and how it has helped her. And she is an activist within her own right, about a lot of different things, and aware, all of them, all of our children are aware of these things, even though they've taken different paths. But
Yeah.
several of them are involved with the tribe, on the council and the nonprofit side. A grandson,
Mhm. Mhm.
and have, just everybody's kind of involved in their own way.
Oh, that's beautiful. What what would you've passed on um so many awesome, ways of looking at the world to your children, and wisdom to your children. Um the listeners of this podcast are mostly women, and I wonder, is there any specific indigenous wisdom that you're familiar with that you think would be particularly important for women in the time we're in right now?
Ah, yeah, it's all about allowing yourself to remember and to understand why you're here. We as women are nurturers. We you know, give birth. We give birth to ideas. Uh, Birthing is sometimes more than children. It's a lot. It encompasses a lot of different things, and understanding the connection to Mother Earth, because the Earth is female, the water is female. We get a lot of our energy from Grandmother Moon,
Yeah.
um, and the balance, Grandfather Sun. So being aware of all these things, and the animals and the plants, and connecting to the stars. I mean, it's not some kind of lofty idea. It's yeah, because sometimes people look at you like, okay, yeah, the cosmos, right? Um, but it's all of those things, because we are a part of it. We come from the stardust. Wherever we come from, we are everything
Yeah.
within the creation. And so, for women, understanding that and being comfortable with it,
Yeah.
and ceremony and prayer is so important. Whatever ceremony might be for somebody, it's not the same for everybody.
Yes.
But allowing some kind of ceremony, because ceremony is life. As a matter of fact, there is a book that's hard to find, and it was written by a man. He's a Mashpee Wampanoag. His name is Gisa Tanamuk, and he wrote a book called Ceremony is Life. It's a very small book, and I will, give you the information so you can.
Sure. Thank you.
And he wrote a book about our way of life, but it's not just a Wampanoag way. It's kind of a way that a lot of people could adopt because it just brings us back to knowing and connecting. And I want to read this one quote that I think is apropos.
Please do.
To women and all of us. Mm-hmm. The survival of all species depends on our grasping the significance of what was learned during the beginning time. And what we learned was this, that ceremony is life itself. It is the way we do things. It is the way we maintain balance, and harmony with all our relations. It is the way we honor our ancestors and protect the earth for the yet unborn generation. In this little book is that bit of wisdom. And there's another person who was a male, but you know what? This man understands balance.
Yeah.
Balance of the male and female within him. Mm-hmm. And when I read his words, I realize that he understands who he is.
Yes.
And here's somebody else that I admire is Evo Morales. He, after one of the COP, I forget what year that was, in 2009, 2009, he decided to bring people to Bolivia to really look at what's going on with Mother Earth, the environment. And so he called for a conference to be held where people could come from all over, indigenous people from Africa, from the islands, from everywhere on the planet, could come and talk about what we as indigenous peoples could do to lift up the energy and the vibration and take care of Mother Earth. So I was fortunate enough to be at that conference in Bolivia. And it was amazing. I met Afro-Bolivians, Afro-Brazilians, and we had our own little meeting, to talk about all of the things that were happening in those communities. And Evo Morales, I think, was one leader who realized that there were issues and they needed to be treated better. And so, that was a good thing, elevating that community and honoring them and acknowledging and not marginalizing them. So I have a lot of respect for what he did, bringing people together on all levels from all different walks of life to talk about this one important piece, living together.
Oh, excuse me. That seems to be a theme in everything that you're talking about. You were talking about, you had sort of a hub house where people came and did, stuff in the backyard and with your kids and everything. And that you found yourself in a lot of community when learning about, on your journey of activism, and that eventually led to you becoming chief. And also, you can hear my cats in the background fighting over territory. They're colonizing a box back there. And here you're talking about this major gathering to bring awareness and look for solutions and stuff. I really appreciate you sharing about these gatherings because community is something that we get conditioned out of, and also, especially in the last few years, this has been a big challenge for a lot of people, is maintaining community. And there's so much healing. Like you're just telling us over and over again, there's healing. You're showing us, even if you're not saying exactly those words, there's healing and answers in coming together with community.
Truly is. You have to care.
Mm-hmm.
You have to want this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all good work, and sometimes, I mean, I never, I don't want to say I never question it, but sometimes I'm like, when will we wake up?
You know what I'd like to say about that is that I used to have this idea that we needed everybody to wake up, right? But more and more, what I'm understanding is that I would like just a critical mass of people to wake up. We just need critical mass. We don't need everybody. Not everybody is asleep. So that's my prayer right now is just that we just as many people as possible till we get to critical mass. And in my heart, I believe that that's what matters the most.
You're right. Yeah, because everybody's not going to wake up, but key groups of people in different places, raising the awareness and finding ways to do something about it. I mean, it's the voice that needs to be heard,
right,
and allowed, and not drowned out or told, "Oh, don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about." And people who do know are consistent. That's the whole thing, to be consistent and show
word. Yeah.
what it is. Here's the proof. Here's the proof. And there's a lot of proof out here, and different levels and different situations that are going on. So, these stories need to be heard, and examples need to be shown, so we can do something about the state of the earth and the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you're speaking to my heart right now, and it's also a little bit of calling out because unintentionally, but consistency has been an issue for me. So part of doing this podcast is about consistency and just being consistent with it, because I do have my own fears, just like I'm sure many people listening. There are things that I experience, and there's some sort of specific wisdom that comes through me. And I believe that those strong things that come through us are very challenging to the system around us and challenging to how we've been living. And I'll go out there and I'll say my thing and I'll do my work. And then, I'll get some feedback of people who are vibing with me that I can work with and build with and learn from. But then there's also the feedback of like, stop, cut it off, get smaller, you're wrong, all this stuff. And I sometimes allow that to really get to me, and then I get inconsistent. So thank you for saying that, because obviously it was time for me to hear that. And maybe for some of our listeners, it's, they have a door open for hearing that as well.
Look, my husband and I had a radio show, and fortunately we were on XM satellite radio at the time before it connected with Sirius. But so we had like a national audience and the local DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia audience, and we learned so much, and we worked hard to have shows that were going to not only enlighten us, but to bring a conversation about the things that were happening, people, communities, the world, and we one amazing interview that we did was with Creto Mutwa from South Africa, and he was a seer. For the life of me, I can't bring exactly what his title was. I'm hearing it, but I don't want to say it if it's the wrong thing. So he had a lot of knowledge, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
Vast knowledge, and got downloads from the universe, from the cosmos. as well as coming up from the earth and the water and everything living. And to hear his words was totally changed my life in a lot of ways, just from, listening to him. And we brought him back another time, which we didn't think we'd be able to do because, South Africa and, making sure his sound was, it was a lot, but the miracles do happen. And so many things. And the whole thing about the African and the Native, because so many people, have these stories, and we were blessed to be able to bring those stories out to the airwaves to listen to the frustrations and how people being told, just like I was told, you don't exist. And then to help people through that pain, because I've been through that pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my mother told me, don't be in pain about that. Stand strong. There's a Wampanoag word that means stand strong. It's Iotosh. Stand strong in your truth. And so that's how I've tried to, and I shouldn't use the word try, but sometimes it was trying to live that word. Because we have our weaknesses, and sometimes it's like, throw your hands up. You care. It's not like you just don't care. But it's like, I don't know what to do with this now.
Yes.
Then you sleep on it, you pray on it, you do ceremony, and then you get back out there.
Yes.
And you keep going. So Ayotash, stand strong, is a message to not just women, but to everyone who feels like they have a purpose.
Yeah.
A raison d'être, a reason for being. This is who we need to morph into, to have a reason for being. And it gets back to the gifts.
Yes. Speaking of gifts, I mean, just in this last, hour and a half that we've talked, you shared such a wealth of wisdom, and I know you're only really sharing just this modicum of your very dynamic journey. How has this influenced your art? I mean, I've gone to your Instagram and I've seen your website, and your art really is like, to me, how I'm receiving it is like storyscaping. I mean, there's such a clear story. I might not know what the exact story is, but clearly I am receiving your art as like stories. And I watched one of the videos of your, the tour of your studio, which I highly recommend. I'll link that for people in the show notes, a tour of Penny Gamble's studio from maybe a few years ago. And, maybe more than a few years ago. I don't know. I just know that there's a bird in the background named Spike that's like, caca, 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 the whole time. And it's so funny. But one of the paintings you talk about is these trees. And you had this conversation about, with a friend who is creating something or had a cause or something like that. And so I'm just wondering how have these like really rich experiences that you are in that is actually healing the world on behalf of yourself and also the rest of us. How is that influencing your art?
Well, like you said, there are storyscapes because just a little thing about my mother. My mother was an artist, a visual artist. And she always said, you have to be consistent in how you create. So people will know when they see that, they'll know it's your work. So, it's almost like a signature. But I never could do that because I am influenced by so many different things: nature, people, conversations, music. So when I sit down to paint, I allow the color to do it. I might have something in mind, but it might morph into something else. And I just go with it. I go with it because these are my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, whatever I'm listening to. I could be listening to James Brown And then I might be listening to Beethoven, or Duke Ellington, or any a rapper. I that's kind of because it's the pace of life. It's the energy, and then sometimes I might just be listening to a flute music or just jazz or Miles Davis. Or Mark Carey, my son, who's an amazing pianist and composer. So I've got all these things going on in my mind, and I've got this canvas or my iPad, and I am digitally creating, or I am doing it with pen and ink, markers, and it's the feeling, and that's what I'm. These are my messages, because every day is different. Every thought is different, and so that's kind of how I express myself in that way. So I'm consistently inconsistent with how I create, and even my poems. I love writing poems. I've been writing poems since I was a little kid. And, I remember, sometimes my mother would read one of my poems. I would be so excited that I would really be looking for that key, her eyes. She'd say, yeah, this is quite good, and but I might be saying it snowed and the snowflakes came down and landed on the ground, and I was very happy. That was just a poem that would come to me. So that's just kind of how I roll, that's kind of how I roll. You go with what you have at the moment, and it turns into something.
You go, that right there is profound. You go with what you have in the moment and it turns into something. If that is not the encapsulation of creation itself and God finding out who God's self is.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions for you before we go. If the Penny Gamble Williams of 20 years ago walked into your dwelling right now and sat down, wanted to chat with you, what would you say to her?
Whoa, 20 years ago. Let's see. What was I doing 20 years ago? So I was like right in the throes of all the tribal stuff. And I would tell Penny, you need to slow down for a minute and take a breath, because I was doing so much, because I had this vision. I envisioned, all these different things that the tribe could do, and where we could be and how we could get our land back. And I had to realize that I would tell Penny, meet people where they are. Mm-hmm. You have these ideas, but maybe they don't see what you're seeing. Maybe one day they will. They have their own ideas. Mm-hmm. My experiences with all the things that I did as being a member of AIM and Women of All Red Nations, and all those experiences are not the experiences of your people right now. Everybody didn't do that. And you have these lofty ideas of where we need to be, but you have to wait. You have to wait, and they'll get there. We'll all get there, because everybody's an individual, but yet we are connected by this blood. But it'll happen in its own time.
That's beautiful and very important wisdom for anyone who's in activism. So many fights I see with it, like infighting and taking each other down over not meeting each other where each other's at, and being attached to getting somebody to where you think they're supposed to be, instead of allowing the space and moving on with what you want to do yourself. That's and also respecting that you might have an experience, like you were saying, part of AIM and the other group, that you had an experience that other people may not have had. And why punish somebody over that? They're just not there yet.
Right.
They'll find their way back to this like one blood that we all have. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And that is, I just got there. Seriously.
All in good timing.
All in good timing. Of all the things that we are dealing with now, everybody doesn't see it in quite the same way.
Right.
And back then I had this picture, this painting, where we'd be in our village, we'd be on the land, and we'd have our community center and our mini museum, and people would come and they'd learn about us, and we'd be speaking our language fluently, and we're almost there.
Yeah. Bless it. Because
there's been all these detours and life, just life, things happening with people, and it goes back to that little thing that I saw on Instagram, with the elder saying, "This is what I've been trying to tell you." I mean,
a gentle lie told you so.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm not giving up.
I don't doubt it, daughter of quiet fire.
Right. And I also have to say, my grandmother had a lot of influence on me because she was a storyteller. If she went 10 steps down from past her house, 10 different things would have happened to her.
Yes.
Because she only lived up the street and lived down the street. By the time she got to our house, there was like, "You're not going to believe what happened." And my mother would just say, "What happened, Mom?"
6 hours later.
Exactly.
She's halfway through the story. And everybody's paradigms have shifted, and somebody got some healing, and everybody learned something new. Somebody decided to make a big step in their life just from like this 10-minute walk story.
And in the middle of laughter, she said, "Well, I guess I've done all the damage I could do here. I guess I'll go home." That would be the parting words, because we're all over the place because of her experience just getting from her house to our house.
Yeah, I love it.
And it was almost daily, but this was her way to keep us engaged and laughing or thinking.
Yes.
Everybody didn't understand that. They were like, "What is she going to do now? What did she do today?"
I love those people. Those are the best people.
And she used to say she didn't worry about anything. My mother was a warrior. I'm kind of half my grandmother and half my mother. I worry, and then I say, "Wait a minute, do I really need to worry about that?"
Yeah.
My grandmother used to say, "Oh, don't worry about that. Go out and have a good time."
Yeah.
The thing was no fool, no fun. That was her little saying. If you can't be foolish and what's the point? So I have a boring life.
Oh my gosh, I love her. Bless her soul.
Her whole thing was to laugh. Just laugh it off. Just laugh it off, because tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we all need a little bit of that medicine right now.
Her biggest joy was during the time where the horse chestnuts were there. And she used to collect them. She walked everywhere. She would refuse a ride because she didn't want to miss anything. And she would collect horse chestnuts, put them in her pocket, or have a little bag.
Yeah.
Back from whatever she was doing. She'd come down to the house and put it on the table, and she'd say, "Pick yourself out some of those horse chestnuts." And she'd look at them because they were this mahogany.
Yeah.
They'd have kind of the oil from the shell that she would. That was her thing.
Wow.
It's the simple things. That's what she said.
Truly.
It's the simple things in life, So, yeah.
Penny,
Yes.
what is your blessing for this world?
Inner peace, finding inner peace.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll splay out and touch the world so other people can experience some semblance of peace.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for joining me here today. I feel steeped in some things that I definitely have been seeking to hear, and you've shared your wisdom so beautifully. And thank you for joining me on a day that you're honoring your dear mother, Quiet Fire. And I hope that you come back because we have so much more to talk about.
Definitely. Just call me. I'll be there.
Yes. Yes. Blessings to you. And thank you, listeners, for joining us for this awesome talk.
Aquani, peace.
Thank you, Auntie Penny. It's an honor to be welcoming your grandmother energy into the Woke Wisdom Podcast family. And blessings to your dear mother as she created a beautiful spirit in you. And before we go today, beloveds, remember to check out Penny Gamble Williams on social media. All of her links are in the show notes. Her artwork is mesmerizing, and I think you're going to love it. And if you liked today's episode, if you're resonating and you have reflections, please rate and review wherever you are listening to this podcast. It only takes a few clickety clicks. You can be done before I get to the end of this sentence. So now, lay back and enjoy this vibe. Aquane by Penny Gamble Williams.
All praises to the Creator. As we awaken from the indigo sky of dreams, illuminated by the stars, and step into the light of dawn, rise up, be lifted in prayer as the sun rises in the east. Receive the gifts that the east brings forth every day. Let us open our hearts and accept energy for the renewal of life, the warmth of spirit, trust, beauty, vision, truth, hope for all humanity. Rise up as the sun rises from the east. Be joyful, share these gifts with the people in our lives and those who we don't know. Rise up like the sun rises in the east. Let us lift our voices up to the Creator. Resist those who speak of war and destruction. Talk about peace, only peace. Walk the labyrinth of peace. Resist war. Speak up. Speak out. Fear not. Be courageous. Stand strong in the indigo light of divine love. Rise up like the sun rises in the east. Aquani. 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 Let the
The original and healthy beats for this podcast were created by Quincy Davis. His details are in the show notes. Woke Wisdom Podcast episodes are written, hosted, produced, and edited by me, Alexandra Loves. My guests, of course, bring their own wisdom. If you have any questions you want me to answer on the podcast, you can email me at wokewisdompodcast@gmail.com, or even better, text the podcast at 601-301-6974. I would be so grateful if you helped me share these messages far and wide by boosting the podcast with good reviews on Apple Podcasts, or by sharing the episodes with friends and groups and families on social media. That would be so awesome. It just takes a few moments and a few clicks. Click, 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 clickety, click. Be blessed, and I'll see you next week. Oh, one more thing. They told me I needed a disclaimer, so cue the music. Let's do this. The information in all podcast episodes and corresponding materials of the Woke Wisdom Podcast with Alexandra Loves are provided for general, informational, and explorative purposes only. It is not professional advice. Any content provided by Alexandra Loves, guests, bloggers, sponsors, or authors are of their own opinion and not intended to defame, slander, or malign any person, place, or thing. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or attached material. Alexandra Loves and her guests are not therapists, counselors, physicians, unless otherwise stated. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast or corresponding materials to treat any mental, physical, or medical condition in either yourself or others. Please seek out appropriate professionals for help. Privacy matters to the Woke Wisdom Podcast. People, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast may be changed to protect confidentiality. Through this podcast and corresponding materials, you're able to link to other websites which are not under the control of this podcast or Alexandra Loves. The inclusion of any links does not necessarily imply a recommendation or endorse the views expressed within them. In no event is the Woke Wisdom Podcast or Alexandra Loves liable for any loss or damage, including without limitation, indirect or consequential loss or damage, or any loss and damage whatsoever arising from your interaction with this podcast or corresponding materials. This podcast and all corresponding materials should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever. This podcast and all corresponding material is owned and copyrighted by Alexandra Loves. You are welcome to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. Please acknowledge the Woke Wisdom Podcast with Alexandra Loves as the source of the material. You may not, except without our express written permission, distribute or commercially exploit the content. Email wokewisdompodcast@alexandraloves.com to attain written permission.